3 scary dogman encounters, based on true stories. Story 1. I used to be the guy who laughed at ghost stories around the campfire. The skeptic who rolled his eyes when people claimed to see mysterious creatures in the woods. That confidence was shattered the night I stepped out of my tent at Greenhaven Park in Louisiana. What I witnessed changed everything I believed about what's possible. My heart pounded as I watched something that left tracks too large for any known animal, something with eyes that glowed like embers in the darkness. The creature that stood before me, growing from 4 feet to over 7 feet tall, wasn't supposed to exist. Yet there it was, watching me with an intelligence that defied every natural law I thought I understood. This mystery has consumed my thoughts for 3 years now, and ever since that night, everything has changed. My friend Jake had invited me along for what he promised would be a relaxing weekend in nature. I packed my gear with excitement, looking forward to escaping the city and experiencing the wilderness for the first time in years. Greenhaven Park seemed like paradise when we arrived that Friday afternoon. The campground stretched along the edge of a pristine lake, surrounded by towering pines and sandy dunes that rolled like frozen waves. We spent the daylight hours exploring every corner of this natural wonderland, watching roadrunners dart between scrub brush and lizards basking on sun-warmed rocks. The lake itself stretched out before us, its surface so still it perfectly reflected the cloudless sky above. I chose a lonely spot 50 yards from everyone, near an old oak by the water's edge. A narrow trail wound through the bushes behind my campsite, leading deeper into the woods. The spot felt perfect, isolated enough for genuine tranquility, yet close enough to hear my friends if needed. As darkness crept across the park, we gathered around the campfire for dinner and stories. Jake's kids begged for ghost tales, so we obliged with harmless stories about phantom hitchhikers and haunted houses. Everyone laughed at the predictable jump scares. The stories felt silly, almost childish in their attempt to frighten us. None of us realized we were about to encounter something that would make every ghost story seem like a bedtime lullaby. By 10 o'clock, exhaustion from the day's adventures sent everyone to their tents. I crawled into my sleeping bag and listened to the symphony of night sounds that filled the darkness. Crickets chirped their endless songs while bullfrogs croaked from the lake's edge, and an owl hooted somewhere in the distance. But around midnight, something changed. The cricket songs stopped abruptly, as if someone had flipped a switch. The bullfrogs fell silent. Even the gentle lapping of water against the shore ceased completely. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then nature's call forced me from my sleeping bag. The old oak tree near my tent would provide sufficient privacy. I unzipped my tent and stepped into the cool night air. The darkness was absolute, and the moon and stars were not visible through the thick canopy overhead. I made my way to the tree, using my hands to guide me along the rough bark. That's when the howl shattered the night. My skin crawled before I even realized I was listening. The sound came from the direction of the lake, maybe 30 yards away. It wasn't the howl of any wolf or coyote I'd ever heard. This cry carried something ancient and malevolent, a sound that seemed to bypass my ears and strike directly at some primal fear buried deep in my brain. The howl lasted several seconds, rising and falling in pitch like a siren from hell itself. My legs locked in place. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but terror had frozen my muscles solid. Then I heard footsteps, crunching through the dry brush near the water's edge. Slow, deliberate steps that suggested intelligence and purpose. Something was moving toward me through the darkness. A silhouette emerged from the shadows near the lake. At first, it appeared to be about 4 feet tall, muscular but compact. I thought maybe a large dog had wandered into the campground, but then the impossible happened. The creature began to rise, its joints popping and cracking with sounds like breaking branches. It grew taller, stretching upward until it stood over 7 feet high. 2 ember-red eyes opened in what I now realized was a canine head, fixing their gaze directly on me. I stood there, paralyzed by what I was witnessing, knowing that nothing in my rational world could explain what towered before me in the Louisiana darkness. The creature revealed its long canine teeth and slowly turned away, vanishing into the darkness, leaving me trembling until dawn. When morning finally came, I stumbled out to find massive paw prints in the sand near where it had stood. The tracks were twice the size of any wolf print I'd ever seen, with claw marks that gouged deep into the earth. Most unsettling was the spacing between prints, suggesting strides far longer than any natural predator could manage. When I told Jake's family my story, they dismissed it completely. "It must have been a wolf," his wife said with a laugh. "Your imagination got the better of you." But were wolves really that large and cunning? I know what I saw that night. Greenhaven Park still harbors that entity, watching and waiting. In the shadows. In the cursed swamps of Blackwater Marsh, Louisiana, shadows don't just watch, they hunt. Ethan felt the thick, humid air press against his skin as he walked around his truck that night. Like the fog-shrouded cypress trees that trapped visitors in their twisted maze, the marsh seemed to close in around him with each step. The buzzing insects that had filled the evening suddenly stopped completely, leaving an unnatural silence that made his chest tighten with dread. Something was out there in the darkness, something that locals had whispered about for generations. They said no one who ignored those warnings ever came back the same. Cold sweat trickled down Ethan's spine as he realized he was about to discover that what emerged from those shadows would change everything he thought he knew. The first sound that broke the unnatural silence was a low, guttural growl mixed with a clicking sound, like bones scraping against each other. It came from the tree line about 50 yards away, where the cypress trees grew thickest. Ethan had been checking his truck's tires while Claire, his wife, organized their supplies inside the camper, and both of them were planning to explore the deeper parts of Blackwater Marsh the next day. The humid air stuck to his skin like wet cotton, and Spanish moss swayed from the twisted branches like ghostly curtains in the breeze. Ethan's breath caught as the strange sound echoed again. He glanced back at the camper, but Claire was too absorbed in her work to notice. His neck hairs stood up as every natural sound of the swamp died completely. No crickets, no frogs, no water lapping against the shore. The marsh felt like it was holding its breath. A dark shape emerged from the tree line, moving with an unnatural fluid speed that made Ethan's muscles tense. The thing stayed low to the ground, about 3.5 feet tall, with thick, dark fur and large pointed ears. But it was the eyes that made his heart pound against his ribs. They glowed like yellow embers in the darkness, scanning the campsite until they focused directly on him. The creature paused near a large rock jutting from the swampy ground. It made more clicking noises while its head moved back and forth like it was tracking a scent. Ethan watched in growing terror as the thing examined the area, those burning eyes never leaving him for long. Then it pushed off the rock. A sickening crack echoed through the silent marsh as the creature's joints began to pop and stretch. Ethan's stomach turned as wet snapping sounds filled the air. The beast rose onto its hind legs, its spine extending with bone-chilling pops that seemed to go on forever. His heart hammered as nausea rose in his throat, watching the impossible transformation unfold. The thing stretched to over 8 feet tall, towering above the rock. Its body had changed from something that looked like a large dog into something that belonged in nightmares. The full horror became clear in the moonlight. Its eyes burned like hot coals, casting an orange glow across a dog-like head stretched and warped. With a snout full of gleaming teeth, thick, dark fur covered its muscled frame, and its hands ended in long claws that caught the moonlight. Ethan froze completely as the predator's burning gaze pinned him in place. His muscles locked tight with pure terror. The creature stood perfectly still, studying him with the look of a hunter sizing up its prey. Time seemed to stop as those ember eyes held him captive. It wasn't alive, he realized with growing horror. It was something crafted by nightmares. The beast's chest rose and fell with deep, rumbling breaths that sounded like distant thunder. Ethan couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs felt like lead. The creature took one deliberate step forward, then another, its claws clicking against the rocky ground. "Ethan!" Claire's voice called from inside the camper, finally noticing the silence. "Everything okay out there?" The sound of her voice broke the spell. Ethan's paralysis shattered as the creature's head snapped toward the camper, those burning eyes now focused on a new target. Pure terror flooded through Ethan as he realized Claire had no idea what was stalking them in the darkness. Ethan's hands shook as he grabbed Claire and rushed her to the truck, his heart still pounding from terror. They drove through the night until they found a small roadside diner with flickering neon lights that buzzed and sparked in the darkness. The scratch of a needle on an old jukebox filled the air inside, where an old hunter sat at the counter drinking black coffee. The man's weathered face went pale when Ethan described what he saw. "You saw the marsh dogman," the hunter whispered, looking around nervously. He'd grown up hearing tales of a beast roaming the marshes of Blackwater County. "My grandfather told stories about that thing. It's been taking folks for over 100 years. He leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "You're lucky you got out alive." As they left the diner, Ethan glanced at his rearview mirror and for a moment thought he saw glowing eyes behind them. He remembered the hunter's last words as he left. "Don't ignore the whispers. Blackwater Marsh always knows when you're there." Story 3. I was 11 years old that summer day in 1990. The sun felt warm on my back as I ran through the tall grass with my friends near Bray Road. The air smelled like fresh-cut hay and wildflowers, and our voices echoed across the empty Wisconsin countryside. Everything felt perfect and safe in our small corner of Walworth County. That's when I spotted what I thought was just a really big dog sitting about 50 yards away from us. I pointed it out to my friends, and we all stopped running to get a better look. The creature was completely still, just sitting there watching us. At first, we were curious more than anything else. We had never seen a dog that large before, but it didn't seem threatening. It was just sitting quietly in the grass like any normal dog would. But something felt off about the whole situation. My stomach started to flutter with a strange nervousness I couldn't explain. The creature was too big, too still, and too focused on us. The way it held its head seemed wrong somehow. My friends must have felt it too, because we all got quiet and just stared back at it. Despite the warm afternoon sun, a sudden chill ran down my spine, making my skin prickle with unease. Then the impossible happened. The creature began to rise, its front paws lifting off the ground as its whole body started to unfold, shoulders broadening as it grew taller and taller. My heart began to pound so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't a dog getting up on its legs. This was something completely different. Something that defied everything I thought I knew about the world. Its wolf-like head tilted upward as pointed ears stood erect. The snout was long and narrow, nothing like any dog I had ever seen. Dark fur covered its entire body, rippling in the bright sunlight as the creature continued to grow until it stood over 7 feet tall. It towered above the grass, like some kind of nightmare come to life, its wolf-like head sitting on top of a body that looked almost human in the way it stood upright. One of my friends whispered, "Is this even real?" The question hung in the air as we stared at this thing that shouldn't exist, but was standing right there, in broad daylight. At that exact moment, I felt my childhood innocence shatter into a million pieces. The safe, predictable afternoon had turned into something from a horror movie. My legs felt weak and shaky. My mouth went completely dry. The beast locked eyes with us across the field. Its gaze felt ancient and intelligent, not like any animal I had ever encountered. For what felt like an eternity, we just stared at each other. The creature stood perfectly still, almost like it was studying us. The silence stretched on and on until I thought I might scream from the tension. Then suddenly the creature took a step toward us. That's when our paralysis broke. We turned and ran faster than I had ever run in my life. My friends were screaming and crying as we sprinted across the field. Behind us, heavy footfalls shook the ground, each thunderous step getting closer as the beast chased us on those impossibly long legs. We barely made it to safety that day. The image of that towering creature burned itself into my memory forever. Even now, decades later, I can still see every detail of its wolf-like face and feel the terror that gripped my entire body. That afternoon changed everything for all of us. We learned that monsters are real, and they don't always wait for darkness to show themselves. The mystery of what really lurks around Bray Road, and why it would show itself to children like us, still unsettles me to my core. This creature doesn't hide in shadows waiting for night to fall. It shows itself in broad daylight when it wants to. It chose to reveal itself to us kids on that sunny afternoon, and I still don't understand why. What scares me most is thinking about what else might be hiding in plain sight. How many impossible things walk among us every day that we just don't notice? Your quiet neighborhood street, the park where your kids play, that empty field you drive past. What might be watching from those ordinary places? If you've had your own unexplained childhood encounter, share it in the comments below. And if you want to explore more daylight horrors, make sure to subscribe. Even now, I half expect to see its eyes in the dark. Somewhere in Wisconsin, that 7-foot beast still walks,